Stop
so that I
sharing.
can introduce you and then.
Okay, brilliant.
Yeah. So hello everyone. I'll start with I have something for you all. So even yesterday I said this that corporates they can be the proverbial gorillas, big and mighty and not so agile, is what you think, right? But as you will hear from our speaker, Shameen Prashanthan, about gorillas can dance. So over to you, Shameen, to kickstart about what you have for the audience around gorillas can dance. I'll just hide myself and the screen is all over to you.
Thank you very much, Jagrati. Thank you, Ajay, for inviting me to do this. So I'd like to share some thoughts with you today based on my brand new book called Gorillas Can Dance: Lessons from Microsoft and Other Corporations on Partnering with Startups. I am a professor at a business school in Shanghai. And this research that this book is based on has spanned 15 years and multiple geographical contexts. This school, I'm not sure if you've heard of, but it's China's leading business school. I'm also, apart from being a professor of international business and strategy, I'm the associate dean responsible for the MBA, which is currently ranked number 7 in the world by the Financial Times. So it's like China's INSEAD or London Business School. But I think actually the coolest thing about our school is that we actually have a little campus in Africa. And when travel restrictions ease, the number 1 destination on my bucket list is actually Ghana. I'm very much missing going to our campus in Accra, where I have been teaching regularly. And in fact, just a couple of days ago, I got this picture from a couple of my colleagues at the SEEPS Africa campus to show that this new book has arrived. So I'm delighted that it seems to be available on the African continent through Amazon. In fact, in mainland China, it's harder to get a hold of the book. So let me just give you a whistle-stop tour of some of the key ideas in this book, and it's hot off the press, so hopefully you're hearing some of the latest thinking, and I'm hoping that this overview that I provide as an academic will give a good backdrop to the next session when you will be hearing about the specific activities of different companies. Now, Microsoft is the company that I've perhaps studied the most, and interestingly, it's a company that has emphasized partnering throughout its existence, but engaging with startups is something that has happened more over the last 15 years or so. In 2010, I was at the Silicon Valley campus of Microsoft, where they had their first startup event, which they called the BizSpark One Summit. And a key player here was a guy called Daniel Lewin, who in fact had been part of Apple as a young man, was one of the people that Steve Jobs took when he started Next, and is a Silicon Valley insider. And he was the key person who helped Steve Ballmer back then recognize the importance of engaging with startups, therefore of Silicon Valley. And he sort of passed the baton to Zach Weisfeld, who was very actively involved in Microsoft in Israel. They created a corporate startup accelerator program there, which then got taken to Bangalore and Beijing and to other parts of the world. And so much so that now a company that 15 years ago was seen as not very relevant by startups, you see Satya Nadella, the CEO, with this little, I'm not sure if it's big enough for you to see, but it says Microsoft loves startups, and you'll see the same image on the screen with a guy called James Chow, who is the main guy for Microsoft for startups in China, waxing eloquent about how big companies like Microsoft are engaging with startups. And so from having studied all of this over a long period of time, it made me realize that even a tech giant can face disruption, never mind large companies in traditional organizations. And it's important to co-align what you're doing in terms of partnering with your strategy. It is important to co-create with startups and to also co-evolve what one is doing with the evolution of ecosystems around the world. And that sort of gives me this notion that we need to consider the why, the how, and the where of how big companies, the gorillas, can partner with, how these companies can partner with startups. And so this is, in fact, how the book is structured. And I'm going to give you a whistle-stop tour of what my key ideas and findings are. So first of all, starting with the why. And it's really about managers seeking to be more entrepreneurial. Now, why does entrepreneurship matter for large corporations? I think I'm preaching to the converted here. As many of you know, managers, first of all, in big companies face a threat of disruption from entrepreneurs and startups, as Clayton Christensen describes in his idea of disruptive innovation.
Sorry, Shameen, I think if you're changing your slide, we are still on the first slide.
Oh, dear.
Yeah,
Okay. So I've been moving at a very brisk pace. I don't know why.
Yeah, you can see the new opportunities driving entrepreneurship.
Oh, so if I don't go into a slide now, okay. Now do you see that still? New opportunities driving entrepreneurship?
Yeah.
And now I've clicked and you should see digital disruption. Do you see that?
Yeah, we can see digital disruption under new opportunities.
Okay, now do you see business model innovation?
Nope.
Okay, so there seems to be a lag. Now do you see the whole slide?
Actually, if you can just stop sharing and then start resharing.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
yeah.
Okay, let's try this. Okay, so now what do you see?
New opportunities driving entrepreneurship again.
Now, and now?
No, it's not changing.
Okay, so my animations are not showing on the screen. Now, do you see anything?
Nope.
Oh, that's a shame. Okay.
If you can just go to present and present,
Sorry, how do you mean? So should I stop
presentation
sharing?
mode. No. You go to the presentation mode.
Yeah,
View,
that's what. Yeah.
slideshow. If you can go to on
No,
the
but
top.
that's how I've been doing it. That's the mode I was in from the beginning.
No, actually, we can only see. So maybe you can just shift from here. You can just move from the home section.
Or maybe we just ditch the slides. So can you all see me?
Yes, we can see you.
Okay, this is a shame. I've done this many times. This is the first time that the technology doesn't seem to work. So maybe let me just talk a little bit, and then we can open it up for question and answers. So I don't know whether you saw any of the slides actually. So what I was trying to say and what I was trying to show was some pictures of three people at Microsoft. First of all, a guy called Dana Lewin in Silicon Valley, and then a guy called Zach Weisfeld in Israel, and then this guy called James Chow in China. And the point I was trying to make is that when you look at a big company and how it's been engaging with startups over time, you see that there's a why, there's a how, and a where. So in terms of the why, the basic starting point, as this audience knows extremely well, is the disruption that many big companies face. So you have the situation of managers in big companies facing disruption from startups, from entrepreneurs in startups. So there's sort of a manager versus entrepreneur kind of sense. And then you have this recognition that the big company needs to do something about this. And so you have managers as entrepreneurs. The term intrapreneurship is sort of in vogue. Many companies try to actually have systematic ways in which to help managers in their companies to take initiatives and so on. But one of the things that some intrapreneurs do is to help their companies engage with startups on the outside. And so you have actually a situation of managers with entrepreneurs. And both sides clearly see a big win in this. I think of this as 3 L's. There is the benefit of learning. Both sides can learn something from the other because each one has something that the other doesn't have. The big companies have the scale and agility. I beg your pardon, the big companies have scale and resources. The startup has agility and creativity, and each can learn from the other. Then there's also a benefit of leads. By working together, you can generate more business opportunities that both sides can benefit from. And then you also have a benefit of legitimacy, which is very easy to understand from a startup's point of view. They have credibility by association. But then you have also now big companies actually competing for the hearts and minds of startups with other big companies. So they too want to be seen as well-regarded partners in the startup ecosystem. But we have what I call a paradox of asymmetry. The very differences that make it attractive to work together also makes it difficult to do so. And so understanding to get to the how, if you accept the why is we need to be more entrepreneurial as a big company, and there is entrepreneurship on the outside that can be engaged with. The how needs to take into account what the challenge is. And there are three elements to this asymmetry that my research has highlighted. The first is the asymmetry of goals. That is, the big companies and the startups, they want different things and also at different timescales. And then you have the asymmetry of structure, which is big companies are very specialized and hierarchical. Startups tend to be more fluid and less hierarchical. It's difficult to find role counterparts. And then you have the asymmetry of attention, which is big companies see an ocean of startups out there and they don't know which ones to give their attention to. The startups, on the other hand, may know who the big companies are, but struggle to get the attention of the right people. So if we then need to address these asymmetries, what big companies that have learned to partner well with startups seem to have figured out is you need to address each of these. And to address the asymmetry of goals, what's important is to clarify synergies. This may sound blindingly obvious because the term win-win gets bandied about a lot, but actually, in reality, it's not often clear to both parties what the win-win is. And what I found is that there are 2 broad types of wins that are possible. One is a building block-based synergy, which you find typically in the large IT companies like Microsoft, SAP, IBM. They have platform technologies that they want the startups to build on top of, and when the startup's product is sold, the underlying technologies is bundled with it. But there are also pain point synergies, which you see typically in the more traditional companies. And when they engage with startups, especially startups with digital capabilities, then they're able to fast track their ability to address some of the pain points they have. So BMW, for example, recognizing that the era of the internal combustion engine is sort of now very soon going to be in the past, trying to improve cybersecurity, which has not been a traditional area of strength, and they reach out to startups to help them in this area. And so recognizing the synergies becomes important. Now, in terms of the asymmetry of structure, the second step is to create interfaces. If I'm a startup trying to reach out to BMW or to reach out to Unilever, who do I speak to first? And many companies now around the world have developed these startup-specific programs. And here I find two major types. One that I call cohorts and the other funnels. And what I say to my MBA students is a cohort is like an MBA class. Getting in isn't easy, but once you get in, most people who get in will finish the program, and the peer interaction becomes very important. And corporate accelerators are very much in the cohort side of things. But you also have the funnels, and I say this is like the job search process after the MBA. Many fewer people finish the process than begin because you keep getting screened out, and you may not even know who else is part of the process. So when Microsoft started engaging more and more with startups, particularly driven by people like Zach Weisfeld in Israel, they started developing a cohort-based approach with accelerators. But SAP, not long after, started reaching out to startups. They did this out of Palo Alto, but they took a different approach. They said, we will have a funnel. If you're a startup interested to engage with us, say you want to build on the HANA platform, you get in touch and you send us your idea, your prototype. This gets rigorously evaluated by a team of engineers in Germany. Only about 40% make the cut. But the real payoff is, in the end, only about 10 to 15% of the original applicants then get go-to-market support. And that's a completely different approach. Each has its advantages. The funnel approach is better for predictability. The cohort approach is better for serendipity, unanticipated outcomes. Now, the third step, which is to address the the asymmetry of attention, is to cultivate exemplars. To cultivate success stories very deliberately from a very early stage. And to me, this is what distinguishes the companies that do startup engagement well from the ones that don't. And this means being very mindful of who you're bringing in. It is also important to fairly quickly work out what potential win-wins can actually be in reality, because then managers in the big company know what to look out for, and startups have clearer expectations of what they can get out of the relationship. This in turn helps to attract other high-quality startups to the programs, but it also helps to deal with the doubting Thomases within the big company, the business unit managers who ultimately need to work with the startups. Interface managers, so BMW has a program called Startup Garage. People in BMW Startup Garage will interact with startups, but they can only have meaningful engagement for them if people in the innovation units, the people running cybersecurity, are willing to engage with the startups. And when they see success stories, they're more willing to do this. But the other part of the how, if this is the partnering process, you have to have the synergy, the interface, and the exemplars. To make this a repeatable process, and one for which the company has internal capabilities, it's important to initiate, systematize, to initiate, expand, and systematize the process. And I don't have enough time to go into this in detail, but one of the key things about initiation is getting started, even if it's something small. And for companies that have come late to the game, one of the things they can do is to actually piggyback on what other companies have already done, especially if they are not rivals. So for example, in the last couple of years, Walmart have been trying to engage with startups in China to address some of their pain points, to make the consumer journey more pain-free. And to do that, they approached Microsoft, who have an accelerator, who have had an accelerator program in China for a number of years. And the person running the China accelerator for Microsoft sort of curated a set of 8 startups that he felt had relevant retail tech from the alumni pool. There was a weekend hackathon for Walmart executives, and then they identified 3 that then worked on pilot projects that were delivered in a 60-day time frame. And so they could make a start, move quickly, and leverage what was already happening in the ecosystem. Expanding involves the people at the interface being politically savvy, getting support from internal champions, people who are willing to generate opportunities, and also have a set of roving ambassadors, people who know about the program and are willing to act as mentors. And of course, systematizing it means you want to mainstream this. And this is where Microsoft in particular have done an amazing job, in my view, because now Microsoft salespeople have the same incentive to sell Microsoft products as they do startup partner offerings that are selected for their co-sell repository. And in this way, we're beginning to see, and this is the advantage of my research that has spanned 15 years, that I've been lucky enough to see this happening over time. Very briefly on the final part, which is the where. The important thing for big multinationals to recognize is that they need to adapt their startup partnering programs and activities in different parts of the world. And of course, startup ecosystems tend to be at the level of a city, at a subnational region. So one of my the highlights of 2019 before travel stopped in 2020 was I got a chance to visit Kenya, and in Nairobi it was very clear that there's a thriving, emerging ecosystem. So when you think about these city level startup ecosystems, you can categorize any of these into advanced economies or emerging economies, and highly sort of reputed clusters and less reputed or non-clusters, if you will. Now, in the clusters, be they in advanced economies or emerging economies, bringing together big companies and startups is relatively straightforward. But of course, in emerging markets, you also have to compensate for some of the deficiencies. When you're not in one of these major clusters, so in the UK, if you were in Glasgow, for example, or in China, if you're in a city called Ningbo, these are both port cities, have many strengths, but then they don't have high-tech startup hubs. And yet in both these cities, I've seen very interesting examples of large multinationals like IBM engaging with startups. And there what matters is entrepreneurial policymakers who help to bridge these types of companies. And I think actually one of the great enriching aspects of my research has been over the past 5 years doing some work in Africa as well, which to me is very clearly the next frontier. South Africa, Kenya, and Nigeria are three places where I've been to and done research and can see clear examples emerging of companies like IBM, Microsoft, and others engaging with startups here. But what's really fascinating to me is with a lot of these startups, it's not just economic payoff, there's social impact as well. And that's what opened my eyes to the note on which I end the book on, which is corporates partnering with startups can be a force for good. I hope you can see in the background I have the SDGs. And I think this is very important, that also startups engaging corporates can have not only greater innovation, but greater social good. Startups in Ghana, for example, that I've been looking at have been engaging with telecom giants like Millicom and coming up with solutions for youth. In some cases, these big gorillas can also be non-traditional allies, like the UNICEF was another large organization that some social ventures were partnering with in Ghana. And whereas in other parts of the world, like Silicon Valley, you have entities like Plug and Play that link these big companies and startups. In Ghana, it was an NGO called Reach for Change that was doing this. Another interesting example I came across was Kusini, a startup in South Africa that has innovative ways of providing clean drinking water, and in partnership with DHL, they have reached 50 locations in South Africa where DHL have depots, including hard-to-reach parts. And so to me, in this decade of action, the 2020s is meant to be the decade of action where we accelerate our progress towards the SDGs. COVID has made it even more challenging, yet even more important. COP26, which is around the corner, reminds us of SDG 13, climate change, and other relevant SDGs. And I think when managers in big companies and startups, where entrepreneurs and startups work together, we really can increase our odds of making progress here. And so that's the final thought I want to end on. So I look forward to any comments and questions you have. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Shameen. I'm sorry for that thing where you weren't able to present, but I think there was some kind of QR code on your screen. If you can just pull that out, if someone wants to scan it and look forward to buying the book or maybe just purchasing it, they can do that.
Sure, I'll try and find that in a second.
Any questions from the audience for Shameen? You can just put it on the Q&A section or maybe just raise your hand and I'll get you on the screen. Okay, we are getting reactions from the audience. Likes and claps. Yeah, so there's this QR sticker. I think the one which says book website, right? Shameen?
Right.
Yeah. If you guys want to just get this book, get your hands over this book, just scan the QR code and maybe you can just, even I'll do that.
I've actually got a lot of stick in China now because a lot of people have been asking me, when is the book going to be available in China? And, it's been very strange. The book was released at the end of September in US and Canada. It's supposed to be released in the UK on the 23rd of November. So I'm assuming that's the date where some European countries will get it. But China seems to operate very differently. And so we're still figuring it out. And in the meanwhile, my colleagues in CEIBS Africa got it. So anyway, I'm so glad that if you order on Amazon in Africa, it seems to be coming maybe directly from the US or something, but it got to them in less than a week. So this is of interest. Yeah. I hope people in Africa can get it.
And even I've a few tweets and comments on LinkedIn and Twitter, saying that people have got this book and commenting and all.
Right.
Yeah. So any questions, audience?
Did I just mesmerize everybody? or is it getting close to lunchtime in East Africa? That may be maybe the explanation.
but they're just giving some reactions.
Okay.
I think they just have reactions and you've actually mesmerized them. So yeah, so I think we are good. I can't see any questions so far, but just to mention that he'll be around. So if anyone wants to catch up and I have one question from your research. Do some corporates perceive startups as more of threats to their business than enablers?
Yes, that's a very good question. And actually the answer is yes, in the sense that very often that's the fear that makes them want to become more entrepreneurial. But I think a lot of companies, the more enlightened ones and the ones that startups should try to engage with, do recognize that in fact there is an opportunity as well to engage with these startups. So there's always going to be an element of competition and cooperation coexisting. And I think this is true at multiple levels. I think that's just a reality of life. But the companies that I mentioned, like Microsoft, like BMW, I would also add to that list Bayer, Unilever, Walmart, they do feel threats, no doubt. Many, Barclays, which is engaging with a lot of fintech startups, and one of the earliest Western companies to set up a corporate accelerator in Africa. So, they all recognize that disruption can come from startups, but they also see an opportunity. And I think many of them see the benefits of engaging with startups outweighs the costs. And what I find really interesting is BMW, for example, when they started engaging with startups in cybersecurity or autonomous driving or whatever, one of the early decisions they made is there will be no haggling over intellectual property. Any intellectual property that gets developed will be the property of the startup. And that took away a lot of anxiety from the startups. According to BMW, it took away a lot of legal hassle from them as well, trying to work things out. And to me, that's an interesting mindset that says we need to be entrepreneurial and collaborative. And so, we actually will probably have more to lose by not engaging with startups. So, but I can't say that this is the case with every single corporate. But I think there are now enough of these more enlightened corporates out there across various industries. And for startups in the audience, these are the corporates that they should be reaching out to.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Shameen. I think there's one more question, the last one we'll take, and then we'll close this. Do you
Okay.
think the number of corporates will be setting up interfaces or accelerators? How will the space evolve?
Oh, that's such a good question. So, I think with some of these things, there's a bit of a life cycle, and different companies will feel at different points in time that maybe an interface has run its course. Maybe it's time to retire that and move on to something else. So SAP, for example, have actually retired that startup focus program that I sort of described earlier and replaced it with SAP Foundry, which is actually more accelerator based. But we can easily see the companies going the other way. One of the other things I've seen is some companies now no longer take fixed cohorts every 6 months or whatever, partly because of COVID. They realized they anyway had to switch to virtual, and then they've now made it a rolling program. And so, yeah, I think companies will evolve a little bit how they do their practices. I think different companies will do it in different ways. The key is twofold. One is ensuring that you develop this partnering capability specific to startups. Many big companies are good at engaging with other big companies, not so good at engaging with startups. But once it becomes second nature and people take for granted that this is important, then the actual format may differ. And the second thing is that I think who within the organization runs these startup programs will also evolve potentially over time. I've seen it start in brand marketing initially or in innovation, but ending up under a digital transformation office of the CEO. Again, the most important thing is that the support for these continue over time, and that the initial efforts that some early pioneers make don't get wasted.
Well, I think that answered the questions put out there. So thank you so much, Shameen, for joining us. Maybe you can just hang around, meet few startups that are exhibiting at the booth, and maybe you can just be around for the next session that you're coming up with.
Super, thank you
So yeah,
very much.
yeah. So guys, stay tuned. Please stay over here. I'll come with my next panelist for the next session. Thank you, Shameen. Have a great day.
Thank you too.